As promised, today we'll talk about the 1970, the experience, and touch on the effect it had on this country. In this, the third part of this look back on the 1970 Black Power Uprising, on this, its 45th anniversary. Soyini Grey reports.
Super militant when the streets were frantic with a raging spirit freedom.
The voice and poems of Dr. EFEBO Wilkinson, who was detained on Nelson Island during the state of emergency. He wrote many poems about his experience on the island. They are not widely known. In fact, not much is known about 1970. And it's here that the work of journalists in the recording of history can't be discounted. The late Raoul Panton's book, Black Power Day, contains a detailed account of the revolution and his experience of it. In it, he talks about covering some of the famous Woodford Square speeches with then political editor at the Trinidad Guardian, John BABB.
You try to get the whole picture for the reader outside, because this is what I tell all reporters, that when you write a story, it's like an artist painting a picture. If the painting is bad, nobody wouldn't be interested. So you have to make it interesting for people.
After McCandle Dagger, the name that comes to mind when one hears of 1970 is Dave Dabo.
Well, the name came somewhere in the early 70s. That name changed because, you know, when you do history, and especially when you look at your African background and your African roots, you realize the process that resulted in me having a name like Dabo, which has French, is one that I couldn't have any pride in. And I wanted to have a name that was more authentic and a name that represented me and what I am and who I am. So I just chose a name that would represent who I am, in my own opinion.
And talk to me about the activism, the personal activism that led to 1970 for you.
Okay, let me say, I was an activist from, I would say, from high school, from secondary school. Not in the same way as it became later on, you know, but I did have a social conscience and did involve myself in things that had to do with what was happening in society broadly. I did a lot of reading as well. I read widely, especially on political issues and that sort of thing. So I came into university in 1966 with politics in my head. And when I say politics, I never had an interest in conventional politics. But in terms of what was happening with the world and where was this society going and things like that, and how do you change society, wanting to make a change in society. Very conscious of those kinds of issues.
1970 happened because the young people decided to take action.
They grew up on a diet about the West Indies cricket team, Africanism and Pan, George Padmore and C.L.R. James, the non-aligned movement, Nehru, Gandhi, independence.
45 years on from 1970, the priority now is the recording of history. The activists who took part in the uprising now see their role as educators who need to share their knowledge with the youth. Because if the future of Trinidad and Tobago is in their hands, they should know more about where they came from. Soyini Grey, C News.